Today's video is either entitled Dude, meaning me, you are a dead set plonker for not taking your own advice here, or OMG, aren't I lucky that the Ferrari of home shed drill presses here was not actually a Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Ford, Jeep or Land Rover. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au. New cars cheap, but Australia only. Website. Code. Okay, so today's video is really a bit of commentary on the car industry and how it hasn't evolved and how the worst performers fail to service their customers adequately, So the bar of minimum compliance with consumer law, like legal, illegal, here's the boundary. The boundary in the car industry is the definition of excellence in customer service. It's the minimum standard of consumer compliance, right? And the reason this has been highlighted to me so vividly this week is essentially because I failed to take my own advice. Now, my own advice is when a new car, hotly anticipated new car gets launched, people want to queue up for it. And this is invariably a bad idea because there will be teething problems requiring running fixes like service campaigns. And why would you queue up and pay top dollar, because there's no discounts up front, why would you do these things when if you waited 6 months, you could just jump in later after all the fixes had taken place? So the great example that's contemporary here is the Ford Ranger. When that latest model Ranger first debuted in Australia, it was hotly anticipated. People were waiting. It had been delayed because of the pandemic, and there were, don't quote me, but 390 something components that were critical to the vehicle sourced from China that couldn't be put into production in Thailand, and therefore everything stalled and the vehicle was months late. And then when it finally debuted, there was this queue of customers over the friggin' horizon like that, and everyone was paying the full freight, okay? They take their Rangers and they're shaking all over, dude. They're shaking all over because there's a manufacturing defect with the tail shaft. And when quizzed about this, of course, the boss of Ford just wouldn't get into it, wouldn't explain what the defect was, which to me isn't a state secret and shouldn't be dealt with in the manner of, the satire that's floating around at the moment regarding diversity, equality and inclusion hire at, for example, the US Secret Service. So he wouldn't be drawn on it, and all these people are driving in their new Ranger like this, presumably because the yokes on the unis were somewhat out of phase, typical manufacturing defect before they got their production totally squared away, So we're in this environment, and I'm always saying to people, wait 6 months. If you can, wait 12 months because there'll be discounting. All of these teething problems will be solved, blah, blah, blah. Do I take my own advice when I step out of the bubble, out of the motoring bubble and into my hobby bubble, which is, making cool stuff out of metal? So, no. Why would I take my own advice? I'm not in the bubble anymore. Today's video is sponsored by Olight, which has a massive winter sale wrapping up tonight at midnight. That's Friday, the 26th of July. So if you're watching shortly after I publish this video, there's a window of opportunity in which you might like to capitalize on 55% off these extremely high quality torches. 50% off on the website, an additional 5 using the code JC5 in the description. My favourite Olight, the Warrior Mini 2. This thing is awesome. I carry it everywhere. It bears the scars of my ongoing attempts to kill it, and yet it remains spectacularly reliable. If you're confused about the vast range of torches offered by Olight, then you're not alone, okay? And I've done a video. I'll put a link up there on that card so that you can cut through to the ones that I find particularly impressive, my favourites, if you like. It really depends on the application that you have in mind. Another one that perhaps you should consider, and these things are dirt cheap too, they're only about $40, is the swivel. Now, It's a torch and a work light, and it swivels, and it's got a carabiner, and it's magnetic, so it could light up whatever you've got in a dingy location in your shed. And then, of course, if you break down in the middle of the night in your car and you need to change the tyre and it's pitch black outside, then you can just stick this on the fender and all of a sudden, hey, that job just got a lot less reprehensible. It won't change the tyre for you, of course, but at least you'll be able to see WTF you're doing. I won't take up your time any longer on this stuff, but check out that video up there if you like to cut through and figure out what's going on. Thanks very much to Olight. Don't forget the 55% off, because otherwise you'll have to use the other code downstairs that only gives you 12% off during non-sale periods. Hare & Forbes Machinery House, they released this super cool new drill, and it's not cheap. Like, it's more than $2,000 if you pay the full freight, which I did, because I do have a commercial relationship with Hare & Forbes. I give them money, and in exchange, they give me stuff like this. So I'm just a customer, basically, and I see this drill press, and dude, I've got to have it. It's like the red lipstick smile across the bar, okay? I have to have it. So I sign up. I go and pick it up, I strap it into the ute, I bring it home, I crane it in here. It's freaking awesome, dude. It's got lots of really good features that typical home drill presses don't have. It's got really robust table, and it's got a big, thick column, okay? It's true what they say. Size does matter. When it comes to drill press columns, it's super rigid, so that when you're using, for example, a hole saw to cut your way through a piece of steel plate or something, it doesn't shake, like it doesn't chatter, because it's rigid. That's great. That's not exactly why I bought it, though. It comes standard with a keyless chuck, which is awesome also. That's usually $100 upgrade kind of thing. But the party trick, okay, is variable speed. It's got a DC brushless motor. It's got normal power going into it, 230 volts at 50 hertz, single phase going into it. And it converts it to 12 volt DC brushless, and that gives it variable speed, which is freaking awesome. Only I turn it on, okay, and it runs backwards. And I think, that wasn't in the brochure. And then I turn it off and I turn it on, and it runs backwards really slowly, and then it figures it out and runs forward. And then I turn it on, it runs the right way, and it keeps doing this stuttering in between backwards and forwards. And sometimes it catches up and corrects itself, and other times it just runs really, really fast backwards at like 2400 RPM, which is the machine's maximum speed, and the potentiometer up here has absolutely no effect. So I'm scratching my head here going, I don't think that's supposed to be how it works. I ring them up, they put me onto the service department, and they're really good. They're really good, okay? They don't say what a car dealer would say, which is like, yeah, bring it in, we'll charge you $350 to diagnose it, and then if we decide this is a warranty claim, we'll talk to you about refunding it, if you remember, kind of thing. They don't say that at all. What they actually do is they send out their most experienced technicians. With a car, obviously, you have to bring it to them, but it's a bit of a drama picking this thing up, putting it back in the ute, taking it to them. So they send their dudes out. And not only that, they send out their most experienced tradie, a dude named Bill. And he's got his, I'm going to say, apprentice in a kind way, a dude who's a qualified technician but is being trained up for the specifics of this job. So they both come out here and they do a really good job looking at it. Now, I've already mentioned to the two service guys at Hare & Forbes, Lachlan and Connor, who both did an outstanding job, by the way, throughout this process, that it's probably the logic board, because you can't do this kind of thing without having a little logic board, like a little computer in there. It's actually just about here in the machine. It sits horizontally like this. The motor's down here kind of thing, and then there's wiring and all this stuff going through here, and a fan up the top, big heat sink that's also a bearing block pressed into this bit on the top. You need to pull that out to have a look down inside at what's going on. There's also a ducted fan here. Here's the inlet. There's a outlet just up there, so that's the airflow that keeps the whole thing cool. So yay. The beauty of it is that you can get right down to, I don't know, 200 revs or something, and you maintain the maximum torque, which is awesome for drilling 16 millimeter holes. Not that I do that often. I'm typically drilling, 12, 13 millimeter holes. 12 and a half or 13 is a clearance hole for an M12 bolt, right? The main point is these two dudes come out, they walk up here with their tools, and I stand around, we talk. They pull the control panels off here and here. They pull all of this guff off the top. They have a look at it. They remove the logic board. They check it for dry soldered joints. They put it all back together. Still doing the same thing. So that's okay, because it's a problem with the logic board and they've ruled everything else out. Anywho, Connor, I think, from the service department, I hope I'm not misrepresenting that. It's not Lachlan. I'm sure it was Connor who rang me up and said, can you shoot a video of the problem? We want to send it to the factory in Taiwan. And I go, yeah, sure. So I shoot what I would categorise as the shittest video I have made in the past 10 years. It basically just flicks it on, demonstrates the problem with a bit of commentary, okay? And then I unlist it on the YouTube channel, send them a link, and they send it to the dudes in Taiwan. And they re-engineer the logic board. And I don't know specifically what the problem was here. It took a couple of weeks for them to re-engineer the board and get spares to Australia. And you think about that, right? We've got an outlet machinery house, Hare and Forbes, in Australia, which is a tiny little customer of that mega factory in Taiwan. And incidentally, the distinction between Taiwan and China is that the quality, I would categorise, the quality coming out of Taiwan is 50 to 100% better than the quality typically coming out of China, at least for budget machine tools, which is what I own, essentially. So we've got this small retail outlet, family-owned business in Australia, small customer of that factory. We operate in a market which has atypical power compared to the rest of the world, like we're on 230 volts and 50 hertz, and the rest of the world overwhelmingly is 110 and 60, so that could be a factor. But anyway, dudes in Taiwan talking to dudes in Australia, engineering a fix, getting the spare parts out here, and a few weeks later, like I'm gonna say 3 or 4 weeks, Bill is back up the driveway. This is Tuesday morning this week, and together I hand him the tools, he does the job. I don't mind being the apprentice. It's quite the relief when you don't have to make any of the hard decisions yourself, right? So he's standing on a step, fits a new motherboard, we plug it in, she's fixed, okay? This is freaking awesome. I haven't had to get off my ass and bundle the thing up and take it in. I haven't had to negotiate in that soul-destroying way that you so often have to negotiate with a car dealer about diagnosis fees, and then we're going to check back with the mothership to see if they're going to do this under goodwill. There's none of that. There was an honest conversation about the nature of the problem. They engineered a fix and they implemented it at freaking warp speed. And I would suggest that a minimum of 30% of the car dealers in this country and probably 70% of the car importers could learn a little bit about this experience. And by the way, okay, like I don't get freebies from Hare and Forbes, although they were apologetic about the problem with this machine, and they sent me a couple of freebies, all right? They sent me these two delightful, very cleverly laser cut and etched stubby and bottle wrenches, which I have decided to be buried with, okay? Just in case the tables in my heaven are as my faith would indicate to me. Oh, they sent me these really cool magnetic stubby holders as well, although I don't advocate, clearly as a professional, I don't advocate drinking and drilling. That could end badly. They sent me them. I'm going to be buried with them as well, just in case those tables are full in heaven of booze and weed and pills, in between the hot tubs full of cheerleaders' mommies named Cherry and Candy with residual daddy issues. You can have your heaven. I'm having my heaven. I'm going to be buried with them just in case they come in handy, later in the afterlife. And I also want to be buried with a copy of the Bee Gees hit single from the 70s, Staying Alive. And I really only want to do that to fuck over archaeologists of the future. They'll be doing endless head scratching over that one, I'm sure. I'm going to enjoy that in the afterlife. And then if they upload my consciousness to the cloud, I might give them a year or so of brow furrowing and head scratching and then send them an email by way of explanation. Like it didn't mean anything, dude, kind of thing. Anyway, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to point out that when you step out of the bubble, it's amazing. It's amazing that customer service can be so different in just a slightly different domain. Because this is like a Mercedes-Benz of machine tools, at least for the shed. Like, it's an expensive thing, but it's really slick. It's lovely to use. The vibration is limited to non-existent. It's just a really pleasant tool to use. And I want it to be that way because it's not cheap, right? And the other thing I'd point out is that your relationship with a brand of car is forged on the showroom floor, and it can be wham bam thank you ma'am. Like it can be that quick, right? You can walk in, fall in love with that car, not intending to buy it, and walk out with, I don't know, half an hour later with a contract in your hand, scratching your head about getting the number of that bus. Or it could be a courtship that lasts several months to years in some cases, where you do all the research and you come to the conclusion that that is the perfect car for you. But that's where your relationship is catalyzed, if you like, right? Where do you reckon it gets broken? It always gets broken in the service department where you go under the bus, okay? And the reverse happens. It gets strengthened if you don't go under the bus. Like if you get A-grade customer service from a dealer, if they treat your problem as serious to them as it is to you, and they treat you with due respect as a customer, then you become a bolted-on fan of that brand. And I'd have to say that this is exactly the mechanism that worked on me with Hare and Forbes in relation to the problem with this drill press. I was kind of ambivalent about them before this, and I haven't had too many problems. Like I buy stuff from them because it's convenient and they offer good sales service and stuff like that. No, this is not paid for at all, and they don't know I'm doing it, right? I'm just pointing out the difference. But now I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan because they looked after me when the chips were down. And this was a problem, the solution of which was kind of above my pay grade, right? Because other problems that I've had with machines, like with my big bandsaw, I had the bolt that holds the dynamic jaw of the vise, the swivel on the dynamic jaw of the vise, I had it just snap on me. It was a poor quality bolt, and I didn't bail them up about that because I've got a lathe and a milling machine, so I just made a curvy T-nut, and I've got a better solution now than the machine had previously. And my other drill press over here had a dead short in the motor, but they're easy to diagnose. So it was just a piece of the main wiring that was rubbing on part of the componentry that spins, and it went through the insulation, tripped the breaker, and that just kept happening, right? So I'd actually tripped the residual current device, right? So I just fixed that. That was easy to fix, right? This, I had snowball's chance in hell of fixing this. It was just going to be, a monument to bad decision making if they were unable to fix it, or they told me that this fix is going to take 6 months. I could still use the drill press. It just ran backwards half the time, and if it started running backwards, I had to catch it so that the control architecture could catch up and then start it spinning in the right direction. So it wasn't dead as a dead dingo's donga or anything of that nature, but it was unpleasant to use because it's just not supposed to work that way. Okay, so that's the basic thesis here. There's a lesson for the car industry in this, and that's why I think the biggest distinction between all of the cars that you're considering buying now is not the performance-related characteristics between direct competitors. Like if you're in the market for a dual cab ute, sure, there are differences, but the similarities are greater than the differences when it comes to the totality of the performance of those vehicles. Where the big difference is who's going to throw you under the bus and who's going to look after you if you've got a problem. And that definitely warrants further investigation. Point two, take your own advice, dickhead, in future, and then you wouldn't have to play this game. I am going to take that into consideration in future iterations of machinery acquisition, but it's just a really good idea to think about how those problems are going to resolve themselves before you actually get to the coalface of that. So customer support is the biggest difference between all of the car makers operating currently in Australia, and you should really consider it before you spend the big bucks.